Welcome to the state representation of Hesse at the European Union. And on the event, Portugal has voted. These are the third elections that were held in Portugal since the corona pandemic. 11 million of Portuguese, 9 million were asked to cast their vote, asked after the president, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, had dissolved parliament after a budget dispute, and the corona infection cases are at a very high level at the moment. And according to current information, 1.2 million Portuguese are in quarantine. For the elections, these quarantine cases were lifted and all Portuguese were asked to cast their vote. Many people have used the opportunity. It was the number of people who cast their vote was at a record level. And the Prime Minister is and will be António Costa. Now, in a discussion with a Portuguese journalist, we are going to go into more depth with that topic. But now we are going to listen to Mark Weinmeister, the State Secretary for European Affairs. I know that he is that he very much follows the political situation in Portugal, and he's going to say a few introductory words. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you here in Wiesbaden, where I am at the moment on my last day as the European State Secretary, and therefore I am very pleased to be able to welcome you at least virtually today. After all those years as European State Secretary, where I have spent a lot of time in Brussels, today is my last day, and therefore I would like to say goodbye to all of you, those of you who have followed the events and who have accompanied us on our path all these years. And perhaps we are going to see each other again in my new role, and I wish all of you all the very best. Today's event is about Portugal. Portugal has voted, and the predictions were in that sense that the two large people's parties were at the same level, but the election yesterday showed something very different, that the Socialist Party of Costa has been able to achieve wins. They have achieved absolute majority in parliament, and I am very pleased that we, together with António Cascais, we have a very interesting political journalist who is going to share with us his perspective on these elections. And Gudrun Engel is also going to join us today, who has already hosted a number of events on elections. Dear Ms. Engel, also a very warm welcome to you, and I wish you all the best for the future. You are going to go into more depth on the election results. The Conservative Party is at the same level of the elections 2 years ago. We're going to talk about what this means. And the left-wing parties have, unfortunately, have not been able to achieve the results from 2 years ago. What does that mean for Portugal? What does that mean for Europe? And what does that mean for Germany? Portugal has been able to go through the corona pandemic very well. They haven't seen large demonstrations as we have seen in other countries. And perhaps this is why the public has shown their trust has demonstrated their trust in the party that has led the country through the pandemic quite well. I wish you all a very interesting event, and I am looking forward to seeing you at our next events. And I'm going to say goodbye and wish you all the very best. Thank you. Thank you, Mark Weinmeister, and thank you for taking the time one last time. And you have always accompanied us with these events, so thank you very much for that. We are now looking forward to an introductory presentation in order to understand what exactly happened in Portugal. We will be welcoming António Cascais, Portuguese journalists. But before we are going to start, I would also like to ask you to participate in our discussion and in the questions that we're going to ask. If you do have any questions, you can do so by sending us an email to streamline@lv-brussel.hessen.de, streamline@lv-brussel.hessen.de, and you can also use your telephone 0032 472 0303 0032 472 030381. And now we are going to talk to our guest. António Cascais has studied journalism in Dortmund, therefore he speaks German very well. Dortmund is a very well-known and renowned university. He has been working as a journalist in Germany. He writes about Portuguese world, about the Portuguese-speaking world from Portugal, but obviously also other Portuguese-speaking countries. I think we couldn't have had a better expert for our discussion today, and he's going to provide a short introduction. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for having me today. Thank you to all my followers, to all those who are interested in the political scene of my home country, in Portugal. I have been here for 3 times now already in order to talk about political elections in Portugal. First time was in 2015, and this is when a man joined the Portuguese government, António Costa, the president of the Socialist Party, the Social Democratic Party. It is the equivalent of the SPD in Germany. António Costa, in 2015, with his party, they did not achieve an absolute majority, but they still managed to found a minority government, so-called geringonça in Portugal. It was an improvised government together with the Communist Party and the Left Bloc in Portugal. This was something new, something special, and it demonstrated the pragmatism of António Costa, and he, in fact, achieved to govern with this minority government in Portugal. In 2019, there had been new elections, and António Costa, with the PS, achieved to become the strongest party. But back then, he didn't manage to have an absolute majority, which is why he continued to be dependent on the support of the left-wing parties, 3 left-wing parties, the Communists, the Left Bloc, but also the Green Party, PAN. But this government that was formed in 2019 only lasted for 2 years. Back then, there was a government crisis, which was triggered by the fact that the left-wing governments, the left-wing parties did not support the budget proposal, and therefore the president had triggered new early elections for Sunday, for yesterday, and these new elections actually led to a rather surprising result. As we already know, the PS has achieved something that is rarely achieved in Portugal, an absolute majority of the seats in the Portuguese parliament. Back to António Costa. Who is António Costa? He is the son of a well-known author from Goa, from the former colony of Portugal at the western coast of India. Goa, until 1962, was a Portuguese colony. So he is the son of somebody who was born in Goa and a son of a well-known journalist in Portugal. He is the brother of another well-known journalist who is chief editor of a large newspaper in Portugal. He is a so-called animal politico, as we say in Portuguese. He is a passionate politician who had already been the mayor of Lisbon, who has played a part in many different governments. He was, amongst others, he assumed the role of Minister for Interior Affairs. So he now has the majority of the seats in parliament. There are in total 230 seats available in the Portuguese parliament, and therefore 116 seats are sufficient to achieve the absolute majority. Yesterday he achieved at least 117 of the 230 seats in parliament, which is why he is going to represent the majority in parliament. The second largest party, the second most successful party yesterday was the PSD, Conservative Party, with 27.8%. They remained behind the expectations. And at the third point, there is the party Chega. It is a right populist protests party that has set itself the goal to become third most successful party, and they have actually achieved that result. But with 7.15% of the votes, they also remained behind their own expectations. But now they actually have 12 members of parliament in the Portuguese parliament. After that, we have the so-called Liberal Initiative, a very young party that so far only had one seat in parliament, and now they have been able to achieve 8 seats in parliament. And this is rather surprising, since traditionally old left-wing, they actually left behind traditional right-wing and left-wing parties. Another conservative party that only achieved 5% of votes, which means that they actually lost 2/3 of their seats. The CDU, the Democratic Union, and this is a party alliance out of communist and left-wing and green parties. They also lost a number of seats. They only achieved 4.39% and only have 6 seats left in the Portuguese parliament. Another historical party that has existed for almost 50 years in Portugal. Since 1974, the democratic process was introduced. These are the this is the Democratic Party. They only have achieved a very low number of votes, and they no longer have a seat in parliament. After that, we have PAN, the Animal Protection and Environmental Protection Party, the Green Party, that very much discusses the topic of environmental protection, and they have achieved one direct mandate, one seat with 1.53%, and another party has also achieved a direct mandate, Livre, Freedom. This party is led by Rui Tavares, and according to his own information, is the equivalent of the German Green Party, therefore another Green Party, a center left-wing party. These are the results. The PS, the Socialists of António Costa, and we have a number of smaller parties that have achieved vote gains, but we have other parties that have actually lost votes and that have remained behind their expectations. The president of the Conservative Party has already announced that he is going to step back from office. He hasn't done so yet, but he has announced to do so. He said that following such a loss, he is not going to be able to continue to lead the party. The leader of the right-wing populist party has said that the time of getting cozy with the government has come to an end. He said, we are going to chase them, we are going to challenge them, and we are going to criticize their current politics with our 12 delegates. And the leader of the Liberal Initiative said that it is possible in Portugal to also increase confidence with the population without actually talking in populist terms. And with those 8 seats that they have gained, they would like to push the economic policies, liberal economic policies. Catarina Martins from the left bloc, as I already mentioned, they have actually lost a number of votes. Also about her, there are speculations whether she is going to be able to remain the leader of her party. The communist de Souza is going to remain in office. However, 2 other younger politicians, another previous member of the European Parliament could take over, and Do Santos, who actually had taken over the leadership only 2 years ago, he also stepped back. He stood down from office, and he said last night that he is going to support the person who will come into his position. And that also showed that there have been a number of disputes within the party, a number of arguments. The topics that they had discussed during the electoral campaign about energy transition, about climate change, and about animal protection, but they only have 1 seat left in parliament. And also in that case, it is being speculated what are the consequences that PAN is going to take out of this situation. the party leader said that he's going to enter into constructive politics and that he would like to implement constructive measures. These are the results of the elections in Portugal last night. António Costa is now going to govern with an absolute majority, and this is a rare result for Portugal. So far, we only had 2 other governments that actually managed to achieve an absolute majority.
Vielen lieben Dank, António Cascais, für diese interessanten Einblicke, auch für
Thank you for all these interesting things you told us, and we would go deeper, and we would like to ask all of you to contribute to this talk here. If you have any questions, streamline at lv-brussel-de 032. Now, please let us go a little bit deeper into what we have talked about right now. We are talking about the situation in Portugal and the elections and the evolution we have. This is very important for us because we want to see what this means for Europe. As I told you, the numbers are very high incidence of very high incidence, 1.2 million person in quarantine, but they could get out of the quarantine for the elections. So many people went to vote. How did this change come up? Well, it was an electoral approach, a campaign, one of the, let's say, right social democrats and many Portuguese decided that now it is important to go to vote. And you can see the result and the right to avoid the right conservative candidate who might have probably wanted to work with Sheva, which is right wing. As far as the pandemic is concerned, we have to say that we do have a high incidence, that's true, but it's quite relaxed because in Portugal we have the highest number of people that have been vaccinated, and Mr. Costa is obviously insisting on the fact that they managed during the pandemic to take people at the hand and bring them to be vaccinated. And we have high incidence, high numbers, but people feel quite safe, and this has been also transmitted from all the parties. We can go to vote, but we need some protection, and people were using it. Is this kind of a bonus that Mr. Costa had because he was already leading the country in the pandemic, in a moment of pandemic, but also in a moment where the economic part is difficult? Portugal is dependent on tourism, and tourism has gone practically down to zero, and our citizens don't want to make experiments. They wanted to go ahead as always, and also the social party PS made some pressure to do this. No experiments. I'm a well-known person. You can trust me. And with me, you have a clear communication, and therefore many people voted for PS, also people who normally were voting for the left wing, because they said, we prefer him because we do know what we are getting, and we don't want to have push to the right. But this means also that the other left party that they have lost a lot. Would you anyhow say that the PS is the Socialist Party, but in Germany we would put it at the same level of SPD, of the Social Democrats in Germany? We see this also in other countries in Europe, I would say. Well, in the strength of PS is the strength of this political animal, Mr. Costa, if I may say so. And it's not even the election program that is not so different from the other parties, but it's really, it is him, his personality, his ability to communicate. And he managed to bring the message to the Portuguese people, and the Portuguese people to convince them. And another success, a secret for success, is that Mr. Costa has a lot of advantages in different fields. He can act like a communist. He defends the unions, and he is pushing also on the ecological protection of the environment, and if necessary, he can also be very liberal in the economic field. Therefore, he has tried really to do all what he could do, because he was like putting his inputs also in these other countries, and the liberal initiative managed to defend and these positions so that they managed to have 8 seats in parliament. And Mr. Costa and his Social Democratic Party has really a good stand. We have seen Pan has lost a lot. This means that the green topics were successful, but if he is dancing everywhere, is this really something credible? Well, I have to say, yes, we have seen this. The Portuguese, as I do know them in the last 50 years, there were so many elections in Portugal because not every government was in parliament for 4 years, and the Portuguese, and very seldom they gave so much trust that a party got the absolute highest peak, and Mr. Costa was able to convince them. And from the point of view of the citizen who has to go to elections, this is really something credible. These new elections have been necessary because last autumn he wasn't able to push the new household, the new budget through. This had never happened before. Now he has the absolute majority. Do you think that he will be coming with the same budget once again? Because people said he is investing not enough also. He should invest also in social policy. Now he has the absolute majority. He can build up on that. And with this budget, with the same budget that he already presented, will represent this once again because he has absolute majority in the parliament. But Mr. Costa is, in my eyes, also successful because he's not arrogant, saying, well, now I have absolute majority. And no, he said, I do have absolute majority, but this doesn't mean for me that I can rule on my own. I would like to work with all parties, not with the right populist wing. And I would obviously also hear what others have to recommend. He knows that Portuguese people are skeptical with a party with absolute majority, and this has already been not successful. We had Cavaco Silva. He was conservative and was quite arrogant and authoritarian when he had so many votes. And then Mr. Socrates, who in 2008 had an absolute majority, he made quite some things in. We had corruption scandals and we needed a troika. But if we want to come back to this point, he is fighting. But if we look in Eurostat, Portugal has only 76% of the wage. The new Europeans, Lithuania, Lithuania, and others have gone ahead, because Portugal has always a problem also with young people not finding jobs. I wouldn't say it is very dangerous, but yeah, all the parties from the opposition, also the left parties, have indicated the fact that Portugal not has a very good stand in economics. Even some Eastern European countries are better off, but this message didn't work like the parties from the opposition would have wanted. On the contrary, Mr. Costa, and I guess he said that the communist and the left-wing people are responsible for this crisis, and therefore they are to blame and didn't get or shouldn't get as many votes. And the other parties said that Mr. António Costa, as a politician, wanted exactly this in October and in November 2021, during the last year. He wanted new elections. He didn't want an agreement because he saw himself on the way to success and was quite convinced that he will get the absolute majority. And this wasn't the case in the last few days. But today we have to say Mr. Costa did it all right, and it worked. And yes, he was leading the game, even if it didn't seem so in the beginning, especially as far as the party enough. And as far as populistic parties are concerned, this is one of the biggest winners, from 1 to something to 7 point something, Mr. Anto Ventura, but somebody was also talking about football. And he made elections on the basis talking against Sinti and Roma, and he didn't want any fees on the high street. Well, the topics are very populistic, and he is the only one who was also covering this right populist topics. And many of us thought that there would be even more of them, and he said that he might guess 10%. Now it's 7.6 with 12 seats. This is quite a lot. And I would also say the right populist party is a little bit less aggressive than other populists in Europe, like the Netherlands. And there has also been a study at the University of Amsterdam where the right populist movements have been seen, and the Portuguese were less extreme, like the Swedish Democrats or AFD in Germany, or also the Flemish Vlaams Belang, or Cyprus, where we have really a right-wing party. Now, the Portuguese, and I say this as a Portuguese, are not as extreme, and they don't like extremism. They are, let's say, moderate, and even a right populist party is less aggressive than elsewhere if they want to get any votes. And therefore, André Ventura of Chega, he is not questioning the African immigrants or Sinti and Roma, and even there he took a step back, and he's not insisting that much, because normally the Portuguese people do not like it. He is talking about people who live on the social aids because they don't want to go to work. And he says there should be conditions in these cases. From our point of view, this is something very special, because as we said, we see the Portuguese at a very close society where you have solidarity, right, in the pandemic, and it's difficult to divide them. And with all this sits 117 for the PS, and we still have the idea that we have big parties, and this is something that is getting less and less in other countries, and now even absolute majority. How do you explain this? And some of the smaller parties were kicked out. Well, this is something very special. The big traditional parties are still there. One of them didn't get a seat. It's the small CDS, Christ Democratic Party, but the big traditional parties who were one against the other, like PS and the Social Democratic Party. And I guess this is due to the fact that communication in Portugal is working, has been working, and in between the parties and the citizens, the voters, everybody is talking to each other, and people do believe these parties. We have seen it during the pandemic that in Portugal we have positive communication for many things, and many Portuguese said, as far as the measures are concerned, that the sense of the measures were clear and they followed the path. And that is due to the fact that the two big parties are really agreeing in these so important questions that are important for the whole state. This is on the one hand, Europe, because we are always in the top 3 as far as the European Union is concerned, and then from the political point of view, and we agree on the most important questions, and this led to the fact that we have smaller protest parties who didn't have so much success than in other countries in the south and the north of Europe. It's clear we will not have long discussions. We can shorten that. How is the good timing well, the timing, and this should be go ahead very quickly together with the budget in the parliament. Don't you have the ministers, you have to make end up in parliament. It's not a coalition discussion, therefore this is quite quick, and most of the ministers will stay. Only a few of them might change, and they're then they will enter into their work. And in Portugal, like in many countries in the south of Europe, we want to use the money, we want to spend this money quickly and use this money. First receive, obviously, the money in order to go ahead. And so he is going first for the budget and then for the recovery plan. Now, you already said it. Portuguese are very proud to be a part of the European Union. For them, it's very important, and they are convinced. They are convinced Europeans. And António Costa is a politician. He is very strong. He is seen on the scene. And is this something that's pushed people to go ahead and say, okay, this man is working well, we should keep him? And Mr. Costa is at the European level very well known. He had good relations with Mrs. Merkel, with Macron, and he also has big standing in the whole of Europe. The Portuguese are aware of that, and you count on Mr. Costa, and we thought that if he is not winning these elections with absolute majority, then he could resign to somebody is following him, a person who was already seen like the chief of the European Council. This does not seem the case right now, but it might still change, and maybe in the middle of after 2 years he might give the job to Pedro Nuno Santos. He is very important because he is in the building sector, and then after 2 years, if this should be necessary, he would be coming to Brussels. Now, this is depending on the power relations that we will see. Thank you very much for all these impressions that you were explaining, and we know António Costa will stay where he is in Portugal in order to bring the country ahead as an important part of the European Union, and we will see him. We see him here in Brussels, and then we will see how the whole thing will develop. Thank you very much for all this information, and I would also indicate another meeting here in Hessen in 1 week. At the same place. It's always online on the 8th of February, 12:30. How much chemicals does the Green Deal need? And it is about the different substances. Thank you very much that you were here, that you had interest for Portugal, not only for a holiday, but also as far as the political part is concerned. Thank you very much, and see you soon.